Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. It's early February. The Eagles are in the Super Bowl. Go Birds. That's the good news. The bad news is almost everything else. This is a bit of an exaggeration. Look, life is full of many wonderful and good things. Life is full of many good things. The thing is, there seems to be no end to the alarming news stories that come across our eyes and brains every moment of every day. I've mentioned before, I'm Canadian, so this has been an especially alarming time for me. Anyway, for the past few days, maybe years, there's been like a heightened state of alarm. And I find out in the world, in my classrooms, on the internet for sure, a lot of people are asking, what do we do? What are we supposed to do? Like, there's a lot of problems in the world, and some of them are like personal problems, some of the like mental or psychological problems. There's political problems, there's economic problems. And the question is, which of these problems really truly belong to me? Like, what is under my jurisdiction, and what should my plan of action be? So that's what this video is about. It's about how we sort through the different kinds of problems in our lives and in our world, and how we can figure out, like, A, what belongs to us, like what's our business and what's not our business, and B, maybe more importantly and more tricky, figuring out what problems are solvable and what ones are not. And hey, we'll have some fun. Lots of things happen in this video. My dishwasher gets repaired, my son makes an appearance, a lot of things are happening. Let me begin by talking about something Stephen King wrote. Not one of his novels. Those are too scary. No. This was something he tweeted. Actually, it wasn't a tweet because everybody quit Twitter. He posted this on Threads earlier this month. My advice, as best you can, ignore him. Now, I'm not sure if he was talking about the orange authoritarian or about the tech bro fascism enthusiast. I think he was probably talking about the orange guy. Now, I think there are multiple interpretations of what Stephen King meant here, and I want to kind of work through them. In one sense, King's suggestion is that in the face of American authoritarianism, what you should do is ignore it. A lot of people understood King's post in this way. Many people, like thousands of people, flipped out at him, on him, flipped out on him in the comments. No offense, but you are a relatively wealthy, straight white dude. You aren't in danger from this nonsense. I love you, Stephen King, but we need to shut it down. Resist, organize. You don't ignore Nazis. You punch them in the face. And this argument, this rebuttal to Stephen King makes a lot of sense. Probably authoritarianism gets worse if you ignore it and don't speak up about it. And if the concern, if King is just talking about our mental health, look, for your own sanity, you've got to ignore this stuff. You could argue maybe our collective mental health is worth sacrificing if it means protecting the freedom and well-being of others. But actually, I think Stephen King might have a point here. I don't think when Stephen King says ignore him, what he means is don't resist. I suspect what he really means is don't confuse doom scrolling with political resistance. It might feel like speaking out on social media or calling out bad actors on the internet is a thing you can do. And sometimes it feels like you should do that. Lord knows I've done that. I might even be doing it right now. But sometimes this technology makes it feel like we are taking political action when maybe we're not. Let me just chime in here. Let me interrupt myself to explain why I think this example is so illustrative. The problem of bad news on social media is like this thorny kind of problem, because what sort of problem is it? Is it that the political situation is bad and we've got to figure out how to fix it? That's one kind of problem. Or is the problem more precisely that I am like over consuming bad news and it's anxiety provoking? Because that's a different kind of problem. And in some ways the solutions to the two problems are at cross purposes with each other, right? Like the solution to over consuming bad news is to like turn off social media. But arguably that means turning a blind eye to these urgent political crises. So Like solving one problem causes the other problem. In addition to that, I think that the current problem facing us, these new internet-fueled postmodern forms of authoritarianism, they are very difficult to combat. And one of the most frustrating things about them, it seems, is that in trying to object to them, to speak truth to power on social media, it almost seems like you're just giving oxygen to a dumpster fire. And so your very act of resistance on the internet actually seems to fan the flames. And so these new sort of forms of like internet authoritarians that we're seeing, they actually weirdly seem to feed off of public outcry. Social media has been instrumental to the rise of these authoritarian movements, and they are arguably just getting worse. So, it's like the very tool we're using for public discourse, for political speech, is just frustrating us. It's just frustrating us further. And so the problems we're facing, it's just a tangled mess. It's a tangled mess. And I just wanted to take this opportunity to try and detangle some things and make sense of the different kinds of problems that we face as human beings. Let's get some clarity on different types of problems. For example, some problems are tactical problems. These are the kinds of problems you can solve through planning, with self-discipline, with strategy. This could be all sorts of things, like saving for a new bike. Let's say you need $1,000 to get the new bike. How are you going to get $1,000? That's a tactical problem. You see all sorts of YouTube videos about study hacks or productivity. That's what this whole genre of YouTube videos is about, tactical problems. And technology can be very helpful with this kind of problem. It can make things faster and more efficient. We can use technology. We do all the time to solve tactical problems. Let's just say, for example, that you need to focus on a task. So you could use like a little timer gizmo to help you manage your time. But not all problems are tactical problems. For example, the fact that time exists and that as a human being, you are bound by time, that you have a limited amount of time in which to live and get things done. You could have all the gadgets in the world and you can't solve that problem. Let's just call these existential problems. These are problems you just have to live with, like aging. People get old, the body deteriorates, our health declines. That's just the way human life is. You can't morning routine your way out of that problem. Sometimes we run into trouble when we develop like a tactical solution to what is actually an existential problem. I think this sort of explains why that super rich guy is like, I don't know, injecting his son's blood into his body in order to, I don't know, live forever or whatever he's doing. I don't know. That seems like a tactical solution to an existential problem. Hello. Yes. What time? Oh, okay. Well, what about February 4th, the Tuesday? That was a guy calling to help me with my broken dishwasher. He's going to come fix it. That's a tactical problem. This here is cracked. So then you can kind of see it, it's on like an angle. Niccolo Machiavelli is one of my favorite thinkers. That's a funny thing to say. A favorite thinker of mine, of the guys who thought stuff, among the best. Great at thinking, that guy. I teach Machiavelli a lot. I write about Machiavelli. I think about Machiavelli a lot. I try to be a careful reader of Machiavelli. Niccolo Machiavelli was from Florence. He lived in the 15th and early 16th century, and he's best known as a political thinker, a political philosopher. And Machiavelli thought a lot about control and about like randomness in human life. He was really interested in the idea of fortune, like chance, like good fortune, bad fortune, misfortune. For Machiavelli and his contemporaries, fortune was often represented as a kind of goddess, Fortuna. Fortuna was like the embodiment of all the things in life that were left to chance, that you could not control. You've probably heard of the Wheel of Fortune.
Treat yourself a round of sausage.
Well, in the medieval period and in the Renaissance in Europe, the Wheel of Fortune was a really powerful image. It was an image that had a lot of explanatory power. If you look up a drawing or a painting of the Wheel of Fortune, you'll see it kind of charts the career of a politician. You see on one side, there's like a guy who's climbing to the top. And then at the top of the wheel, there's a king or a prince. It's the same guy. He's ascended to the top of the wheel. But then on the other side, you see him falling off the wheel and losing his crown until at the bottom of the wheel, he's being crushed by the wheel. And this was thought to be a representation of fortune in human life, and maybe particularly in the careers of ambitious rulers or politicians. The wheel suggests that there's a certain cycle of power and ambition. Everybody wants to get to the top, and everybody who is at the top will eventually fall, they will eventually decline, and inevitably be crushed by the wheel. For people living hundreds of years ago, this was not something you could solve exactly. Like, this was just the nature of political life. This is what happened. And it sort of doesn't matter what you do, fortune will come for you just like she's come for everybody before you and will come for everybody after you. Machiavelli repeatedly cautions his readers against relying too much on fortune, relying on things you can't predict or can't control. Our contemporary version of this, sometimes you hear people say, hope is not a strategy. That's textbook Machiavelli. So my son plays one of these mobile games called Battle Cats. And it's like you have a cat army and you attack bases. And in this game, you can acquire cat food that you can trade in for cat tickets. And you can then cash those in to do a draw that could get you another cat unit for your cat army. It's a whole thing. But the thing is, when you do the draws, you can't predict what cat you're going to get. You might get a really good cat, or you might get a useless cat. And for players of the game, this can be very frustrating because you can invest a lot of time and a lot of energy accumulating cat food to buy cat tickets, but then when you cash them in, you get nothing. So we've been, saying to our son, there's an important lesson here about investing your energy in things that are really left to chance. This is frustrating because you put a lot of effort into a thing and then it's totally subject to chance. By the way, I think my kid wants to say hello.
What do I do now? Don't forget to like and subscribe.
See you later. What a kid. So Machiavelli, he wants us to understand that a lot of our life is governed by fortune. There's stuff we control. There's a lot of stuff under our control, but there's also a lot of stuff that's not under our control. At one point, Machiavelli actually says it's like 50-50. I judge that it might be true that fortune is arbiter of half of our actions, but also that she leaves the other half, or close to it, for us to govern. But his advice, he's not actually satisfied with 50% control. Machiavelli suggests even these areas where fortune might have power over your life, that you can take precautions, you can prepare in ways that might limit fortune's influence over your life. At one point, he compares fortune to a river. And he says, look, we can't control a river. Some years the river is going to flood. And that's not under human control, right? That's fortune. But as human beings, we can take precautions. We can not build in a flood zone. We can build dams to influence the direction of the river. And so maybe we can exert some control even in areas where it seems like we don't have any control. Hey, by the way, I got the dishwasher fixed. See the thing? No more crack. All fixed up. Shiny new part. So that's one problem solved. In the history of ideas, Machiavelli sits at this really interesting point. He lived right before the emergence of modern science, really, right before the emergence of the scientific method. But we can see in his thought, I think, like the seed of scientific thinking, because Machiavelli was all about looking at the world as a thing that we could understand. And if we understood it better, then we could exert our human industry upon it and assert our control over it. We see in a thinker like Francis Bacon, who was a good reader of Machiavelli, this thread being followed. Francis Bacon is one of the architects, the engineers of the scientific method. And when he talks about science, He talks about using human industry to control the natural world. For the end which this science of mine proposes is the invention not of arguments, but of arts. And as the intention is different, so, accordingly, is the effect. The effect of the one being to overcome an opponent in argument, of the other to command nature in action. And in some cases, this is very good. Like, obviously, we see like a new disease in the world, and we start putting our brains to work, and we figure out how to solve the problem, and we make medicines, and we distribute the medicines, and we cure the disease. And that is noble and good. But sometimes I think there's a kind of generalized Machiavellianism in our thinking about the world. And we imagine that, everything is potentially under our control if we're clever enough. Like if we find the right tool or we build the right machine, we can finally claim victory over Fortuna. But I think it's kind of an illusion. This is kind of an illusion. There's a certain level of randomness inherent to human life. Fortune can never totally be conquered. Not everything can be predicted and controlled. And a lot of human life, I've found as a middle-aged man, is figuring out what things are under your control and what things are not. In Shakespeare's Hamlet, at the beginning of the play, Hamlet is grieving the death of his father. But his uncle Claudius tells him, it's time to move on. 'Tis sweet and commendable in your nature, Hamlet, to give these mourning duties to your father. But you must know, your father lost a father. That father lost his. And the survivor bound in filial obligation for some term to do obsequious sorrow. But to persever in obstinate condolement is a course of impious stubbornness. 'Tis unmanly grief. So Claudius says, you've got to get over it. People die. Everybody loses their father eventually. That's the way of the world. Now, this might be a convenient thing for Claudius to say, given that he has murdered Hamlet's father. He's a murderer. And despite Claudius's interest in moving on, grief is a hard thing to get over. In this play, Ophelia doesn't handle it well either. Neither does Laertes. Hamlet, as a character, is plagued by problems that cannot be easily solved. He's got a lot of problems that are not tactical problems. On the surface, it seems like his problem is a tactical problem. He's got to find the means and the opportunity to assassinate Claudius. He's got to kill the king of Denmark. In that way, he gets revenge for his father, and he gets to be the king of Denmark, which is what he wants. And that would solve his immediate political problem that Claudius has jumped in front of him in the queue to be king. But Hamlet's problems aren't simply tactical, they're existential. Consider, Hamlet encounters a ghost, the ghost of his father, who tells him he wants revenge, and Hamlet swears that he will avenge his father. But the existence of that ghost confirms that the afterlife is a real thing, and that our actions on earth are maybe punished in the afterlife. So if Hamlet kills Claudius, that will be a sin that might condemn him to eternal damnation. That's not very good. And on top of that, doesn't murdering Claudius make him like no different from Claudius? And then by, succeeding in getting revenge, doesn't he actually just become the very thing he hates? On top of that, Hamlet has learned that all of the people in his life whom he loves and trusts are actually liars and deceivers. His mother, who he thought loved his father, has remarried his uncle way too quickly. And then his friends, Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, aren't his friends. They're spies for the king, and they're trying to manipulate him throughout the play. And his girlfriend, Ophelia, he was in love with her, but then she's like bringing back his love letters. And when he decides he finally is going to take action, he's going to kill Claudius, he stabs the guy through a curtain, except it's Polonius. So even when he tries to do a thing, it doesn't work out. And all of that is driving him mad. It's hard enough for him to figure out the tactical problem. How do I kill my evil uncle? But then he's got a series of existential, moral, human problems that are hard to solve and indeed won't be solved by just killing Claudius. Hamlet is in a situation where everywhere he looks, things are bad and wrong, and he cannot figure out how to solve any of these problems. The time is out of joint O cursed spite, that ever I was born to set it right. But at the end of the play, just before this climactic duel with Laertes, and Hamlet's friend Horatio warns him that he might be walking into a trap, Hamlet seems to arrive at this strange kind of peace. There's a special providence in the fall of a sparrow. If it be now, 'tis not to come. If it be not to come, it will be now. If it be not now, yet it will come. The readiness is all. Since no man knows aught of what he leaves, what is it to leave betimes? Let be. This almost seems to be a kind of fatalism. Hamlet just resigns himself to all the terrible things that may or may not happen. There's an acceptance here that things just are the way they are, and he cannot change them. Denmark is corrupt. His uncle wants him dead. His friends have betrayed him. And he just says, let be. And there is a kind of peace in Hamlet's fatalism. He recognizes he's a mortal being bound by time. There's a limit to what he can do. Maybe at the end of the play, he no longer feels like he's responsible for setting the world right. Or maybe he just accepts that setting the world right is going to cost him his life. But for Shakespeare, this fatalism is tragic, right? Hamlet dies. Almost everybody in this play dies. And then a foreign power, Fortinbras, storms into Denmark and takes over. That seems like a problem. I think one of the challenges of contemporary life is we are confronted by problems daily, sometimes hourly. There are so many problems, and we are often called to think about, well, what can I do to solve this problem? And I think we've got to figure out, like, are these tactical problems? Are these problems we can solve, that are possible to solve? Or are some of these problems things that can't be solved? Some political problems are so big and so complex that they start to feel like existential problems. Like, what am I supposed to do about a war on the other side of the world? Because I don't know what I can do, but it feels like I should be doing something. What am I supposed to do when millions upon millions of people are brainwashing themselves on social media? Political problems, even really big political problems, might still be tactical problems that we can do something about. The thing is, you probably can't do much alone. The famous German political theorist Hannah Arendt, she emphasized that political power, was a collective thing. It was really only a property that belonged to groups of people working in concert. Power corresponds to the human ability not just to act, but to act in concert. Power is never the property of an individual. It belongs to a group and remains in existence only so long as the group keeps together. That means that individuals are going to have a hard time effecting political change. We're only going to affect any kind of political change if we organize, if we act collaboratively and collectively. And here is where I think social media might be a really duplicitous technology. Social media is dangerous because it gives us the illusion that we are speaking in public, that we are, discussing things and acting collectively, when the actual effect of social media is isolation and division. I worry that we spend a lot of time on social media, like staying informed and speaking out, when that achieves no positive political effect. Like, social media has now been around for 20 plus years. Has it had positive political effects? Mostly it seems like it's resurrected enthusiasm for German history. And it is notable that all these apps that we use to communicate publicly are controlled by billionaires who can very easily put their thumb on the app to control the messages and make sure that the messages they like are the ones that get surfaced. I worry sometimes that, the apps we use for political speech actually just give us the illusion that we are speaking publicly, talking to our fellow citizens, when in fact we're just screaming into a digital void. Political problems are big. Despite their bigness, they might be solvable. They might be tactical problems. It's just maybe social media is not such a great tool for solving those problems. Look, maybe it can be a tool. I think sometimes it can be a tool. For example, Jamel Bouie is a New York Times columnist. And, I follow him on TikTok and Instagram and YouTube, and I really admire his work on social media. He educates people. He poses questions. He talks about American history. He talks about American constitutional law. And I think like what he is doing, I think is an important public service, but I don't know if that's what the rest of us are doing. I don't know. I don't think we're quite on his level. I find the poet Audre Lorde is really useful for me in times like these. Audre Lorde was a 20th century American writer. She was a Black woman. She was a lesbian. She was a feminist warrior poet. That's how she describes herself. And I've been reading some of her work in recent years, and I find her really inspiring. Also, happy Black History Month, by the way. I want to read you a passage from it's an address that Lorde gave at Harvard University in 1982. And in this address, she's speaking primarily to a Black audience, Black students, her Black peers. But I think her message really applies to all of us. Lorde talks in different essays about doing your work. She says, I am doing my work. Are you doing yours? I find it like a profound call to action. And she gives us one of those here. Do not be misled into passivity, either by false security, they don't mean me, or by despair. There's nothing we can do. Each of us must find our work and do it. Militancy no longer means guns at high noon, if it ever did. It means actively working for change. Sometimes in the absence of any surety that change is coming. It means doing the unromantic and tedious work necessary to forge meaningful coalitions, and it means recognizing which coalitions are possible and which coalitions are not. Lorde encourages us as individuals, I think, to find the work that we're supposed to do. Like, you can't fix everything, but everyone can do something. You can't solve racism, but you can attend a public lecture and educate yourself. You can volunteer at your kid's school. Maybe your work is teaching or coaching, or maybe it's research. It might be charitable work. Maybe it's helping your neighbors or volunteering at a shelter. It might be going to law school. It might be journalism. It might be making art. Lorde's writing, I think, is valuable because it encourages us to think about, like, how can we contribute? Like, what can we do? Like, what can we do in a small way to contribute to solving really big problems? Problems are many and they are big, and we will only solve those problems by working together. And that means we all need to do our part. We have to figure out what our role is. What part do you have to play? What can you contribute? There's a lot to do. Time to get to work.